The evening settled gently over Maplewood, quiet suburb where most homes looked warm from the outside and ordinary from within. Inside the Carter house, soft yellow light filled the kitchen while Emily Carter stood at the sink, drying dishes one by one. The routine usually comforted her, but tonight she felt restless. The house was calm, yet something inside it felt unfinished, like a conversation waiting to happen. Across the room sat Ryan, her 16-year-old stepson. He leaned over his notebook at the dining table, headphones covering his ears, a pencil resting between his fingers without moving. From a distance, he looked focused, but Emily had watched him long enough to know the difference between studying and hiding. His eyes stayed fixed on the same page for several minutes, and every now and then he sighed quietly, thinking no one noticed. Emily had entered Ryan's life 3 years earlier when she married his father, Daniel. She remembered the first time she met him, a polite handshake, a small smile, and careful distance. Ryan had never been rude or angry. In fact, he was almost too respectful, always saying thank you and good night, but never staying long enough for real conversation. It was as if he had built invisible walls, not to push her away, but to protect something fragile inside himself. She tried never to cross those walls too quickly. She understood that grief moved slowly. Ryan's mother had passed away years before Emily arrived, and although no one spoke about it often, her absence lived quietly in the home. Photographs still stood on shelves. Old traditions remained untouched. Emily respected all of it. She never tried to replace anyone. She only hoped to belong in her own way. "Dinner's ready," she said gently, placing plates on the table. Ryan removed one headphone. "Okay," he replied, his voice calm but distant. They ate together in silence. The sound of forks touching plates filled the space where conversation should have been. Emily asked about school, and Ryan answered politely short sentences. Nothing more. Daniel tried to lighten the mood with a joke about work, earning a small smile from Ryan, but it faded quickly. Emily watched them carefully. Daniel and Ryan loved each other deeply, yet both avoided emotional conversations, as if afraid of saying the wrong thing. Over time, silence had become their shared language. After dinner, Daniel received a call from the hospital and had to leave for an overnight shift. He kissed Emily goodbye and ruffled Ryan's hair before grabbing his keys. "Don't stay up too late," Daniel said. Ryan nodded. "I won't." The door closed, and the house grew quieter than before. Rain began falling outside, tapping gently against the windows. Emily cleaned the kitchen slowly, listening to the rhythm of the storm. She sensed Ryan moving upstairs, but heard no music, no gaming sounds, nothing typical for a teenager. Just stillness. She made herself a cup of tea and walked toward the living room. As she passed the hallway leading to Ryan's bedroom, she noticed his door slightly open. A faint light shone inside. Then she heard it, a soft, uneven breath. At first she thought he might be sick, but then came another sound barely audible, like someone trying very hard not to cry. Emily stopped walking. Her instinct told her to keep moving, to give him privacy, but concern held her in place. The sound carried loneliness, not anger or frustration. It sounded like someone who had practiced hiding pain. She knocked lightly on the doorframe. "Ryan." "It's Emily." The room went silent immediately. "Yes," he answered after a moment, voice tight. "I made tea," she said gently. "Would you like some?" A long pause followed. She almost walked away, thinking she had made things awkward. But then he said quietly, "Okay." She returned to the kitchen and poured another mug. When Ryan entered a few minutes later, he looked composed, but his eyes were slightly red. Emily pretended not to notice. She placed the mug in front of him and sat across the table, giving him space. The rain grew heavier outside, filling the silence so it didn't feel uncomfortable. "You don't have to talk," Emily said calmly. "Sometimes it helps just to sit." Ryan stared into the steam rising from the cup. His shoulders slowly relaxed, as if the lack of pressure made it easier to breathe. After a while, he spoke. "Do you ever feel like everyone else knows what they're doing, and you don't?" Emily smiled softly. "All the time." He let out a small breath, almost a laugh, surprised by her answer. At school, he continued, everyone talks about the future. Colleges, careers, relationships. I just feel stuck, like I missed something important. Emily listened carefully. She remembered feeling the same way at his age, though she didn't interrupt. Ryan wasn't looking for advice. He was testing whether someone would truly hear him. I know Dad wants things to feel normal again, he said quietly. And I want that too. I really do. He hesitated, searching for words. But sometimes I don't know where I belong anymore. Emily felt the meaning behind his words. It wasn't about rejecting her or even struggling with Daniel's happiness. It was about identity, about a teenager trying to understand who he was after losing someone important. Families change, she said gently. It takes time to figure out the new shape. Ryan nodded slowly, considering her words. The conversation paused again, but this time the silence felt softer. Outside, lightning flashed briefly, illuminating the room. Emily noticed how young he suddenly looked, less like a distant teenager and more like a child carrying responsibilities. He didn't understand. She realized he had probably been protecting his father by hiding his own grief. Everyone thinks I'm okay, Ryan said after a moment. I get good grades. I don't cause problems. So people assume everything's fine. That happens a lot, Emily replied quietly. He looked at her for the first time that evening, really looked as if deciding whether to trust her with something deeper. I don't want Dad to worry, he admitted. He already went through enough. Emily understood then that Ryan's silence wasn't emptiness, it was love expressed through self-control. They continued talking in small pieces. Ryan shared how school felt overwhelming, how friendships sometimes felt shallow, and how he often stayed awake late thinking about things he couldn't explain. Emily didn't rush him. She simply responded honestly, sharing small parts of her own struggles growing up. Enough to show connection without taking attention away from him. Gradually, Ryan's posture changed. His shoulders lowered. His voice steadied. The guarded politeness faded, replaced by something real. The rain slowed, leaving a peaceful hush around the house. Then Ryan asked a question that shifted the moment completely. Do you ever feel guilty for being happy? Emily blinked, surprised. The question carried weight far beyond teenage worries. It revealed grief still alive beneath the surface. She realized Ryan wasn't just struggling with the present, he was struggling with permission to move forward. Emily took a slow breath, understanding that whatever she said next mattered deeply. Yes, she answered honestly. Sometimes happiness feels complicated after loss. Ryan's eyes softened with relief, as if someone had finally spoken a truth he carried alone. He leaned back slightly, the tension easing from his face. For the first time since she had known him, he didn't seem guarded. He seemed tired of pretending. The clock ticked quietly on the wall as night deepened around them. Neither noticed how much time had passed. The distance that once defined their relationship began to fade, replaced by something fragile but real: trust. Emily understood that this moment wasn't about fixing anything. It was about listening long enough for someone to feel seen. And as Ryan sat there holding his tea with both hands, she sensed that the quiet boy she had struggled to understand was finally letting someone step into his world. She didn't know where the conversation would lead next. But she knew one thing with certainty. This night was changing something between them. Something neither of them had expected when the evening began. The rain continued through the night, falling in a steady rhythm that wrapped the Carter house in calm silence. Emily sat across from Ryan at the kitchen table, sensing that the conversation had reached a place neither of them had visited before. His question still lingered in the air about guilt and happiness. And she understood that he was finally speaking from the deepest part of his heart. Ryan stared into his tea, gathering courage. The soft kitchen light reflected in his eyes, making him look younger than 16. Almost like a child trying to understand emotions too big for his age. He took a slow breath. I think people expect you to move on, he said quietly. But nobody tells you how. Emily listened without interrupting. She noticed how carefully he chose each word, as if afraid of saying something wrong. Years of silence had made him cautious. When Mom died, he continued, everyone was kind at first. Teachers checked on me. Neighbors brought food. Dad stayed home more. But after a while, everyone stopped asking. He paused, searching for the right explanation. It felt like the world decided enough time had passed. His voice didn't carry anger, only confusion. Emily understood. Grief often faded from public attention long before it faded from the heart. I didn't want to make things harder, Ryan said. Dad was already trying so hard to keep everything together. So I just acted normal. He gave a small, tired smile. Emily imagined a younger Ryan pretending to be strong, hiding sadness so his father wouldn't worry. The thought filled her with quiet admiration and deep sympathy. That's a heavy thing for a kid to carry alone, she said gently. Ryan shrugged slightly. I didn't think I had a choice. Thunder rolled faintly outside, and the lights flickered for a moment. The sound seemed to loosen something inside him. I started forgetting small things, he admitted. Her laugh. The way she used to call my name from downstairs. I try to remember, but it feels blurry now. His voice cracked, and he looked away quickly. Emily leaned forward slightly, keeping her tone calm. Memories change, but love doesn't disappear, she said. It becomes part of who you are instead of something you can clearly see. Ryan absorbed her words slowly. For the first time, he didn't rush to hide his emotions. Tears gathered in his eyes, but he allowed them to stay. I thought if I started feeling happy again, he whispered, it meant I was leaving her behind. The honesty of the confession filled the room with quiet emotion. Emily realized that Ryan's struggle wasn't about sadness, alone it was about loyalty. He had been afraid that healing would erase his connection to his mother. You're not replacing love when you feel happy, she said softly. You're allowing life to keep moving while carrying that love with you. Ryan's shoulders trembled slightly. The words seemed to unlock something he had held inside for years. He wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed. I never told Dad this. I didn't want him to think I was still stuck. Sometimes parents worry less when they know the truth, Emily said carefully, but it takes courage to share it. Ryan nodded, thinking. The conversation shifted naturally after that. He spoke about school pressures, how he felt disconnected from friends who complained about small problems while he carried heavier thoughts. He admitted he often stayed awake late at night, replaying old memories, wondering if he was remembering them correctly. Emily shared pieces of her own past not to compare pain, but to show understanding. She told him how confusing adulthood could feel even for grown-ups, how nobody truly had everything figured out. Ryan seemed surprised by that idea. Adults always look like they know what they're doing. Emily laughed softly. Most of us are just learning as we go. The honesty made him smile, a real smile that reached his eyes. Time passed unnoticed. The rain softened into a gentle drizzle and the house felt warmer somehow. Ryan leaned back in his chair, more relaxed than Emily had ever seen him. The invisible wall between them had quietly disappeared. I didn't know how to talk to you before, he admitted. I thought maybe you'd feel uncomfortable if I talked about Mom. Emily shook her head gently. She'll always be important. Talking about her doesn't push me away. He studied her face carefully, as if confirming she meant it. When he realized she truly did, relief spread across his expression. He began sharing small memories, how his mother used to sing while cooking, how she cheered too loudly at his childhood soccer games, how she insisted on family movie nights every Friday. Some memories made him laugh. Others made his voice soften with emotion. Emily listened closely, asking simple questions that encouraged him to continue. Each story seemed to lift a little weight from his shoulders. For the first time in years, Ryan spoke freely about his past without fear of making someone uncomfortable. Eventually, exhaustion crept in. The clock showed midnight, but neither wanted to end the conversation too quickly. They moved to the living room, carrying blankets and finishing the last of the tea. The storm outside had nearly ended. Quiet replaced the rain. Ryan sat on one end of the couch while Emily sat on the other. The comfortable distance showing respect while still sharing closeness. The conversation slowed, turning into peaceful silence rather than awkward quiet. "I feel lighter," Ryan said suddenly, almost surprised by the realization. Emily smiled warmly. "Sometimes being heard is enough," he nodded. "I didn't know I needed that." His eyes grew heavy, and within minutes he drifted to sleep, still wrapped in a blanket. Emily watched him for a moment, noticing how peaceful he looked. The tension she had seen for years was gone, replaced by calm. She turned off the lamp, leaving only a small light glowing in the corner. When Daniel returned home early the next morning, tired from work, he stopped in the doorway, surprised by the scene. Ryan slept peacefully on the couch, and Emily rested in a chair nearby. "What happened here?" Daniel asked softly when Emily woke. She smiled gently. "We talked." Ryan stirred awake and looked at his father. For a brief moment, uncertainty crossed his face. But then he said something simple. "We stayed up talking about things." Daniel noticed the difference immediately, the openness in his son's voice, the relaxed posture, the absence of guarded distance. Relief filled his expression, though he didn't fully understand why. Later that morning, sunlight streamed through the windows as Ryan joined Emily in the kitchen. Without being asked, he helped make breakfast, joking lightly about burning toast. The atmosphere felt different, warmer, easier. Small changes followed throughout the day. Ryan spoke more at the table. He asked Emily about her work. He laughed at Daniel's stories again,